Okay, welcome to Nested Loops. We're going on with the next chapter of Badass Making Users Awesome. So, Nexus has that. I'll turn it over to her now.
Thank you. Let me share screen. Okay, can you guys see my slides?
Yep.
All right, I should probably put it in present mode. Okay. So this chapter has two parts, design and how to reduce cognitive resources. Basically, it's teaching us about the brain power of users and how we can kind of manage the resources that they have to use when using tools that we make, and think about it in the bigger context of what they want to be awesome at. Okay. So the first part is design, and this part started off with an experiment example. So there were two groups in the experiment. One group was told to memorize 2 digits, and then the other group was told to memorize 7 digits. And then they can choose their reward after they successfully memorize. So the group that memorized 2 digits only were more likely to pick the fruit versus the cake, because as you can see, the brain power they had to use is minimal compared to the brain power used by the 7-digit group. And that group, their willpower was weakened because the point of this experiment here is the cognitive resources used for memorization and willpower. They all are, they're from the same place. They're from the same reason. So, if you reduce your brain power, if you have a lot of mental strain doing a task, then your ability to resist temptation will be lowered. Okay. And then basically it's, Don't Make Me Think, which is a different UX book by Steve Krug, very popular. I have not read it, but it's been on my list forever. Anyway, yes, the user's cognitive resources should be spent on solving a problem at large or thinking about the broader concept versus just using the tool. So questions to ask, when you're designing or developing something: where do my users want to spend their precious cognitive resources? What can we do to help? And what are we doing that hurts? So part of, reducing the resources that they absolutely have to use is identifying existing problems and, helping, just thinking about that this is a thing when it comes to designing a product. Okay, reduce the leak. Cognitive resource management for your users is mainly about reducing the leaks. I just listed some examples I can think of when we're creating a product or an app or, a user flow. So getting stuck on a flow that is confusing / has too many call to action options. So this is actually something that they touch on later in the chapter. Brand new feature not having walkthrough or good visual cues. So if you're putting in a new feature, you obviously want, you want it to be used and used properly and picked up quickly. So not having good visuals on it, not introducing it is obviously bad. And then running into errors with no specific messaging, that has to be frustrating because, you don't know how to troubleshoot. So how to reduce leaks. So here they go into tons of tips on how to do that. Background work will turn off if brain believes situation or a task is handled. For example, use your phone to set an alarm to wake up instead of having your brain worry about waking up at the right time. Even though that's kind of automated in our bodies, mostly, like, especially if you work a 9-to-5 job, like my body just auto wakes up at 7:30. But that's an example of something where it starts off as, it's a task. You delegate, you pass off to something, and then it eventually automates, like in your body. And the book also mentioned that the tiny leaks add up. So try to pass off your tasks. You think it's taken care of, but there's like some small percentages of doubt that you have, and even that can add up to a puddle of, it's a puddle of resource, cognitive resource you could have used for something else. So one question we can ask ourselves when creating new products, new features, does this new feature drain cognitive resources? And is this feature worth the gain? Does this feature directly contribute to user expertise and results for the meaningful bigger context? And is there a way to hide or minimize the feature until the user is ready for it? So throughout this whole chapter, the author has a lot of questions, helpful guiding questions that we can be mindful of when creating a product. Is that it? This part? Yeah. Does anyone have any questions or things to add for the first part?
No. I've come up with a similar concept. Just in the framework of teaching martial arts, where I think of it as you only have like a certain amount of CPU in your brain to do certain things. So, for example, if you're learning new stuff, all your CPU goes to learning new stuff, but you can't even worry about doing it right because you're just trying to figure out where to put your hands. So this chapter here with them basically talking the same thing of she's not using she's not using the words brain CPU, but you can only devote a certain amount of time, amount of your brain CPU towards a certain thing. So the more distracted you are, the worse it is. And this is also related. Earlier we talked about like flow state. That, you get in, you're grooving and you're cranking, and then someone comes and bothers you for something silly, and you look at them with that voice. One of the I think it was Paul Graham says, if you're in the flow and someone comes and bothers you for something silly, and you give them that look that, of course, probably looks much worse to them, where like you got snapped out of your flow state. It's related. It's flow state is all cylinders firing on this one, but the same measure is like if I'm a V8 and three of my cylinders are firing, there's something not driving the car, you kind of get distracted. So I like her analogy here.
Yeah, and it gets the chapter later gets into like multitasking and focusing, and obviously you need prime focus to be able to accomplish the task and go 100 at something.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, so how do you actually reduce these cognitive leaks? Here are some tips. So like mentioned before, you can like set an alarm to wake yourself up. You can use many different tools. But when, like, this is an example of when you're trying to teach a user how to use the tool. So you actually delegate as much knowledge as you can to the tool. The example they gave was someone setting up a stereo. And you just open the box, it's brand new, you don't know how to connect it, set it up. Well, you may have figured out how to connect it, that's probably the easy part, and then you want to configure it to do what you want depending on your preferences. And then the tool, the nice stereo, goes, no worries, I have labels for everything pretty much, and the controls are intuitive. Versus you got this version of the stereo that's very sleek, it's very minimal when it comes to the buttons and the labeling, but that doesn't help the user because they would have to consult the manual and nothing is intuitive, and so that's just a block with using the tool. Yes, so don't make users have to memorize is the point. Use labels where applicable. Yeah, so this, like with UI, it's kind of like Sometimes we make these like fancy dashboards and things with like all these different icons, and then like if you're a brand new user to the tool, like you don't know what the icons mean. So yes, where there's room, where it's possible, just use a label.
Yeah. On that note, I think of two opposite things. One, I think of like Office and like Microsoft and Word and the 5 million icons, of which I recognize about one third of them.
Mm-hmm.
At least I can hover over and get the call. But it's like it's like like we'll take Microsoft Word or or PowerPoint or Excel. Everything I've ever wanted a tool to do has been done since Office 97. So in every couple of years when they move the icons and change the thingies, I hate it because I don't want any of your new features and I can't find any of the old features. And a lot of times, like even the menu, like file, open something, is even different. So one thing I think like that says that Office does that wrong, or these not remakes. I know they have to keep selling product, so they obviously remake the product, but um, it's like that's like the opposite. And then on the
Yeah.
other, go ahead. And then on the other side of things, like for example, I want to say like Apple. Apple came out like with the one button mouse, which was great when you weren't doing a lot of stuff. But then over time, it's like okay, well now it's command mouse or it's control mouse or it's or we get the trackboard. Now I got one finger, two finger, three finger swipes. It's like I don't know, it's like you can do all these crazy things with the keypad, but it's not obvious, and you have to hit the manual. So I don't know if any on the team, if we have any power users of the multi-finger gestures.
Yeah, I think it's an example where, it is a learning curve in the beginning, and then once you get used to it, it's just sort of automatic.
Right.
Which that one of the tips touches on this.
Right.
Yeah, so there's different levels to it, and we definitely have to think about this when we're designing stuff, and be choosy in where you apply these sort of like learning curve type features, whether it is worth it or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In the case of the Apple mouse, I think it's the design was okay at the beginning when we first started putting windows and mice on computers. The one button was better because you didn't do a lot. But to this day, you still kind of have one button if you still even get the mouse. But it's like, oh, but now you do so many things. It's almost like back in the day before Apple had their stuff, um, the X Windows system, which kind of predated that stuff. They came typically with like a three-button mouse. I know like Windows went with two, but you get the scroll mouse and there's mouse. And at the time, I think the three-button mouse seemed more confusing, but it kind of scaled later as you did more stuff with computers. Whereas the one button mouse was better at first, but as you got more sophisticated, it kind of was the hindrance. So, anyways, it's something where I'm just not exactly this one, but I'm just saying what worked at first may not be what you need to have later.
Yeah, and it's important to evaluate these things as you evolve a product.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, like I was saying, be choosy about what is essential for them to memorize and eventually automate. So learning and memorizing drains cognitive resources, but after you've learned/memorized it, using the now automatic memorized knowledge and skill is fast and effortless. Knowledge in the head trades slower learning/using time now for faster using time later. For both your bigger context in your tool, tell your users which facts and procedures are worth spending the effort to memorize. So you have to sort of make that decision when you're building a product. So it's very important to think about cognitive resources when doing that. Make the right thing to do the most likely thing to do. So I thought this was good for a screenshot and plug. Yeah, so doors. Obviously, you're going to push these bars that aren't very pull friendly. And then the pull bars aren't Well, they can still be pushed, but it's more obvious that you can grab with your hand and pull it towards you.
This is funny for two things. Have you guys ever seen the Far Side comic where it's like the subtitle is like so and so school for the gifted, and there's a kid going at the door and he's pushing on the pull door or something like that. That's one. I'll look for that cartoon. But that's a funny thing. But it reminds me because because my oldest son was actually asking about. I can't remember where we are, but it was exactly the pull door that you push. And we were looking and he goes, hey, how come this door is push but it's got pull? But we realized it was like, look, uh, industrial doors only made certain while, so they just put the door in and they had to use the sign that says push pull instead of changing the door. So I found this pretty interesting because
Yeah, and there are also, I've seen doors that explicitly say push and pull, so that's more labeling examples, I guess. Um, okay, so avoid choice paralysis. So I found this rings true. Everyone knows that choice paralysis is generally what we try to avoid when creating a experience. So what? So when we build a product, I feel like mass market needs to hear this. Sorry, or some of the leadership at Hedgeye. But anyway, what we think when we're giving more options is, oh my god, like the users will be like so delighted because now they have so many of our products to choose from. But what's actually true is they get stuck in choice paralysis and they don't know what to do, so they don't do anything. And then if they do something, say subscribe, so they like second guess themselves because they look at all the other options and think, oh, what if? Okay. So there's a difference between having choices and making choices. It is obviously inherently a good thing to have choice. And it's a totally different thing to be making a choice because that, again, takes cognitive resources. So in the perfect scenario, we give our users as many options as they could want or need, but we also give them trusted defaults, presets, and recommendations. Yeah. Especially in the beginning, we make decisions so our users don't have to. Which is why, in some websites, you kind of they ask you what's your age and what is your preference? Are you this? Are you that? In order to narrow down to choices that are suitable for you, despite them having maybe a billion products.
I kind of think that last recommendation, pre-thought. It's like give them choices, but give them recommendations. So in programming languages, Perl came up with this saying, Tim Toady, there's more than one way to do it. So Perl's strength is its weakness. You can do it many ways, but the weakness is that there are many ways to do things. So, like for example, I've probably written like 50,000 lines of Perl, and there's still Perl I can't read because there's so many ways to do things. So that's a weakness. So Python takes the opposite approach. There should be one way to do things, and and so they try to narrow it down. This is great because I always hear the Python guys, give me like a week, and then you can read 90% of all Python. So that's a powerful thing. And then Ruby sits in the middle, where like Perl, there's many ways to do things, but there's typically a quote-unquote Ruby way, the preferred way to do things. So there is this trusted default recommendation, which is probably 80-20. 80% of the time, that's the thing that you want to do. But the 20% of the time that you don't want to do it that way, you have the flexibility. So Perl sits in the middle. You have the flexibility, not Perl. Ruby has the flexibility of Perl, but a bit of the preachiness of Python. So, and again, speaking as a Ruby team, I think that's one of the valuable strengths of Ruby. And how this might apply to product, I don't know if you can do a similar thing. If we think about programming languages as product, I mean that's a pitch for me, and probably why I like it.
Okay. All right, so more tips. We obviously want to help our users automate the skills, as mentioned before. So we can do this by having them focus on like a main skill set, and then going from A to B to C, and focus on those versus developing a lot of sub skills at the same time. And the brain is not really focused, and it can't get from B to C very easily. Okay. Yep, that's a good balance. Next tip, deliberate practice. So ideas in order to keep your practice going. You can use tracking tools and apps. You can use practice notebooks / habit trackers. A lot of people bullet journal, and habit trackers are like a big part of bullet journaling. And one example I put in that I didn't have is accountability buddies. You can assign someone to hold you accountable to something and check in, like once a week or a few times a week, or however frequently you choose to do that. This is something I actually have done with my self-development group, and it's helped a lot. So it's a good system. Next tip, you can help the user with their top of the mind problem. Set reminders and delegate. Yeah, so basically assigning a tool to remind you of something when it's something that can't easily be tracked, or it's not necessarily a skill of a tool. Like the example they gave is, oh, I have bad posture. I need to work on that. So you have this motivator that will buzz, and it's a wearable. So wherever you go, it'll buzz like every, I don't know, however long you set it, 20 minutes, every hour, to remind you to stop slouching. So that's one thing. And then, so reducing the need for willpower. So obviously, as we learned, the less memorization you have to do, the more willpower you have. And the more memorization you have to do, the less willpower you have. These 7-digit take choosing people. So try this. Assume willpower doesn't exist for your users. How will that change the design? So that's an important question that we can look at also in creating products. Tips help them build automatic habits. So the example they gave here is a photographer habits. Taking photos can be automatic. Well, yeah, maybe. But things that it can be, things like charging batteries, importing photos from card to computer, keeping memory cards empty / ready. So preparedness is also a big part of like keeping your process going and keeping your practice going. And yeah, these automatic habits, in the case of this photographer, these are just small things that'll help you do your job. And then you can also help users have intrinsically rewarding experiences. So this example was karate. They gave that example as more rewarding example. I can see why. It's group training. You have like certain levels, like mentioned in the previous chapter. You have the belts, and you are motivated to go and upgrade your belt, and like learn with a group, versus like, for example, a solo gym workout on a treadmill or just on the machines is just not as rewarding. I mean, you can track your own progress there, but there's really no one holding you accountable or anything, and you're not, it's just not as motivating as something like karate, which is a group training, and there's belt levels. Yes, intrinsically motivating experiences don't require willpower because we want to do them. We love doing them. And then the bigger context. So we're going back to in the beginning chapters. We have to remember that there's a overarching context and something that the user wants to be, which is that's kind of the goal, is to help them get there, help them be awesome. So for this example, it's a rock climber. The tool is running, and the context is they want to be awesome at rock climbing. So they run, they develop their cardio and their endurance, and train for that in order for them to be awesome at climbing up. So the tips that they give in the chapter kind of build up on each other. Changing deliberate practice that requires willpower into automatic habits will then become part of the tool that helps you get to your overarching goal. Okay, and they touch a little bit on external rewards, which sounds like it may be a good idea, but they make a good point here in that it creates motivation for the reward versus creating motivation to do the actual action / habit / practice. Which just emphasizes building a process and a routine is key. And extrinsic, I said that right. Extrinsic rewards are likely not sustainable in the long term. I mean, you can't, I don't know, maybe it can work, but I see the point here. I see that it's obviously better to be motivated to do the actual thing. Okay, and then you can achieve optimal brain resource allocation with focus. We screenshotted the brain resource represented as shapes here. So, you have to use some brain power to filter through this span and figure out what's really important to you and what you want to focus on. And that is it. Does anyone have any questions? Anything to add before I go into my thoughts?
Yeah, when I look at her tips here, it really reflects to me how extreme programming and TDD really address, like, a lot of tips here go, oh, I'm always like amazed at Kent Beck and ultimately I guess Ward Cunningham's genius, where, how do I say, so we'll look at TDD. It's both like one thing I talked about, a process. It's this process that you set up. It's a process that you follow, and there are rewards because your code will be more reliable, be faster. There's the whole it's bringing psychological effects to being efficient, right? Because of psychology. So if we look at it's also about psychology is how to manage complexity. This picture right here really hits, like, okay, the left is, these are all the things you could think about, but these are the things you should be focusing on. Like, I realize extreme programming is all about figuring out, oh, here's the 5 million features you have. What should you work on? Well, let's figure out, and to some extent, like lean is that one. MVP is, oh, our product could be everything on the left. Well, what's the MVP? Well, MVP is that hexagon in the middle. Okay, let's make that first and see if people like it. And if they like it, we'll make more of it. Right? So that whole pick the important thing, build it, doing those vertical things instead of horizontally building a product is one part. And TDD, it's TDD is a lot about, besides just all the built-in testing and stuff, where it and the rewards that come with that one, it's really about taking the problem and putting all your CPU. I'm going to write a single test that focuses on a single thing, and then I'm going to be able to put all my brain power on this. And because I TD, I don't have to worry about regression because my test will make that pass. I don't have to worry about breaking the code. All these things I would otherwise think about because I have tests. All these things that you worry about as a coder when you kind of code test driven. You don't worry about in TDD. I wrote the test. It's what I'm going to focus on. I have other tests. Nothing else is going to break. I don't start thinking about these other 15 features. I wrote one test. I got to write just the code that makes this pass. So it allows you to put all your CPU on this one, which is also, and a lot of that worry is like, well, fear and indecision and things like that they talked about for choices. That's the choices. Well, what do I code on next? So this like explains psychologically why TDD and extreme programming works, which makes me think again that Kent Beck is really more geniusful than I thought he was in the first place. So, but I think this picture is a strong picture. But as she was talking about tips, I go, oh, this is why extreme programming. I have to go on Twitter and tweet that and mention Kent Beck. And Kathy Sierra, though she doesn't do anything like these days.
I think this is one of the more interesting chapters, in my opinion. I obviously, Don't Make Me Think, that's been around for a while by Steve Krug. People say that generally, but she, in this chapter, she explains why are you not supposed to make your users think? Well, they have to use so much brain power to think about all these other stuff. You should try to make it a little bit easier on your users and apply this questions and this thinking into your design process.
So that's my thought. Anyone else? Can't be just me. I can't be the only one with an opinion. I know Diego's got lots of opinions. Okay.
No, I mean, some of this seems like obvious, mainly because I do own the original version, the original copy of not copy, edition, I guess, of Don't Make Me Think, and it is in the office. If you want see the very first one with all the super old website examples, that's why whenever I reference a Mystery Me navigation or Mystery Me stuff, that's what I thought I reference. It's from that book, I think. But yeah, no, there's a lot of it's interesting, some of the stuff automated tracking, is mentioned in this chapter, and some of the stuff can actually work against you based on different books, whoever you listen to, because as you said, automatic tracking for something, everybody knows whether a measure gets tracked, gets done. We kind of end up being a double-edged sword in a way. I don't know how in the terms of a particular tool that you're building, if you do an automated tracking, you're pretty much taking away or stuff from other tools. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
If you're saying, oh, well, you should automate this, and then you just end up forgetting it because it's in the background.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you have to automate things that are supposed to go in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Anyway, that's all. That's all I have. Alex, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly found some of this interesting. I mean, I've also read Don't Make Me Think, and I think I read that same version you did. I remember some of the examples about Amazon and stuff. But about I think it's an interesting what the decisions, when it's talking about making the right decisions on what you should make users learn. I mean, Forrest brought up the trackpad, the mouse with Apple's mouse before. you know, like for me at least, like that's now super duper simple. Like, and I use a lot of that all the time, like all the finger gestures and but it's just like, what do you choose to teach them? I think is more of like my kind of question, right? It's like, what, you know, it's like I understand like, oh, don't make things like don't try to overload them and give them like cognitive space, but you know, the decision and like what you actually choose as important is like, interesting to me as well.
Striking a balance, right? Because like, you know, you want the user obviously to make, you know, like good progress on your tool and make it easy and fun to use, but then like when the learning curve drops, then you know it's just like boring. Like what do? If you're not adding new features, if you're not, you know, creating a compelling experience, then maybe users won't come back to your app, your tool, whatever you're making.
Right. Yeah. And I think I definitely agree with your sentiment, Alexis, that maybe Matt should be reading some of this on the choices.
Well, you know,
Well, you know what? Because and we shouldn't talk too much detail, but
yeah,
there's a difference between acquisition, retention, and the part that this book addresses, I think most people don't do. What everyone does is the marketing, get them to sign up. But we want to not only keep them, but make them so awesome. The point of the book is that their proof of awesomeness makes other people sign up for the product. Like, it's not just us that doesn't really address that one.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, I'm not hating on our business goals. It's just, you know, this is a different approach, and maybe it won't work for our users. Maybe it will. Who knows?
Right. But I don't even think they're aware of that part. It's all, I mean, I think as far as not history, life cycle of the business, we're still in the acquire.
Yeah, right.
We don't have the foresight of, oh, now how do we make badass users, because we're still figuring out the acquire thing. But yes, I agree. They should watch that side. But maybe our next thing, actually, we can talk about next books. Maybe our next book should invite them over. All right.
Okay.
Anything? All right. Were you doing any summary speeching? Okay. Is that it? Any other discussion, comment, questions? All right. Very cool. So what's left? Like you said, there's like a wrap up and epilogue. Is that all? That's all left?
Yeah. There is the last part of the chapter: escape the brain spam filter, and then there's an epilogue.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we should be able to wrap that up the next one. Any volunteers?
I'll take it.
Oh, awesome. All right, we'll wrap that up. So let's talk a little bit. So we might wrap this up next time. I have been thinking a good candidate book for next one. Actually, in between, if I don't know if we have the right timing, I was thinking of maybe doing like a shorter, like 1 or 2 session overview tutorial. We talked about Graylog or some of our other monitoring tools. I don't know if Don feels up for. It would be like at least a month away, anyways, because we have at least another session. That might be a nice breather in between. But I'm really thinking about Shape Up. So Basecamp, formerly 37 Signals, they've written a number of books. In fact, Keith even gave away their rework book. They have a book called Shape Up, which they released digitally online directly. So
right, and it's free, right?
It is free.
If you get, I think they refund you if you get it.
Oh no, that was for the other one, but both their other book is also free now too. They had a process book, which you might do sometime, that is now free, but I paid way back in the day for. But the other one, Shape Up, you just go to the website and download it. But anyways, it's how they develop product, and I've always thought Ryan Singer had a lot of good insight on making stuff that is, I don't know, intuitive. I mean, it's this kind of stuff, making stuff that people love to use. And I did get to spend some time with him at, I don't remember which conf, probably RailsConf 2008 or something. I had I was at the table from lunch, and we just talked about it. And he probably just talked earlier about like how we did a certain thing. So I'll send links out. One I would suggest that one is a good thing. That again allows us, and I need to make sure to put Terry and Jeff on the invite. And I think it'd be useful. It's more, I think, less abstract, but more about like how do we literally make a product and their steps, or how they make a product. We don't have to make it that way. And that's something I think a short book would be. Don't Make Me Think. We could do that one also. So think about it. I'll send the link out for Shape Up. And yeah, then we'll have Alex next time. Anything else? And I'm also open to your suggestions. So, okay, that's it. Well then, thank you. Enjoy your day.
Thanks.
Thanks.